Right now we are supposed to be online. Everything is working. So thank you, Jim, for coming to our Let's Talk It Through series. And I know several times we discussed already earlier about um, something about that topic of parts. And I'm super curious about to know more why you chose parts and what do you exactly refer to the parts and why you are interested in that topic in general.
Well, one of the first things is just to establish that we generally all have a concept that we have different parts of ourselves. So, like in common language, we talk about a part of me feels this, a part of me feels that. And we know that we behave differently in different contexts. So like if you say you went back to the school that you went to school as a child, that would activate certain kind of memories and experiences, and you would be more in contact with that part of you that felt like a child and what that felt like. So that would come more into your consciousness. So, and we can give more examples, but I think people kind of get the basic idea that we all have these parts and that they become activated in different contexts and in different situations and with different people. And I suppose one of the key ideas that I would kind of push is the notion that actually we're subliminally and subtly conditioned to behave for certain parts to come out in certain contexts. They're conditioned. So if we feel perhaps slightly under a threat, like say somebody in a higher position at work asks you a question that you feel uncomfortable with, that'll activate a part of you that maybe is a different part from the part of you that maybe somewhere else is the team leader or the team manager, where you have those different roles. So the first premise is that we all have these parts. And I think the second thing moving on from that is that it's almost like a basic question of life or philosophy that given you have these different parts, how do you, if you can, make a choice a bit about which ones to be in the conscious, which one do you act from? Do you have the best part to do a particular job? So you've got tasks in front of you. And in order to perform those tasks, have you got the best part out? And in fact, there's a part of you that chooses which part is, choosing. And just to give a simple illustration, if you've done a lot of revision, say for an exam or an important presentation, and as you're giving the presentation, you're suddenly interrupted by a lot of internal chatter about, you shouldn't be doing this, or you don't feel you're able to do it, or what, any kind of self-criticism, anything that's distracting you is another part that's taking you away from the job in hand, because you know that you have the skills because you've done the preparation and you've probably done similar things before, but now you have this part of you that's kind of either in conflict or something else going on. So what I'm suggesting is it's almost like, or it can be a fundamental question to be asking yourself all the time, like as a basic kind of philosophical starting point. Which part is out at the moment? Which part is in the consciousness? And is it the best part for the task in hand or the situation?
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be able, really, I suppose what I'm saying is to have access to a repertoire of parts and to be able to choose the one that's best.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well,
that's a
yeah.
pretty sophisticated way of thinking for most of us, because usually, or a lot of the time, we are not so discriminating or discerning about which part is in the consciousness, which part, so we might be responsive or, just not performing as well as we could.
Mm.
So that's why that's the interest.
Yeah, that's the way you describe it is resonates in many ways with my, at least with my experience. And yeah, we have NLP education and I have some resonation there. But I'm just curious, in terms of using language and terminology, how part is different from state? Because in my mind, again, it's like probably language kind of tricks. Because when we are talking about states, I am in this state, I am resourceful state, and it's in my mind, states are. It's almost like it implies that almost there are unlimited amount of states available, and they may be even shifting from one to another with ease. Like how we could shift our state from, I don't know, from one feeling to another. It's almost like a continuous kind of type of field of states. When you say part, it's almost like implies that there are limited amount of them, maybe
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, few, and they maybe have a certain particular label, or I'm just curious about that. How you differentiate state from part, or they're the same, or could you please
Yes.
elaborate?
I think there are some differences. And the way that you're describing states, I understand, I believe, and the limited, or no, the unlimited range of them that you talk about. Generally speaking, most people have access to a more limited number of parts, which isn't to say that they are limited, but most people generally operate from a number of parts.
Mm-hmm.
They have a number of kind of, and these parts, they are skills that often you hear referred to as being formed in the kind of in the person's neurobiology. All that Hebbian stuff about, there being specific parts that are wired together, that when you need to perform a particular task, those little group of dendrons and synapses and that all kind of congregate together. And
Yeah.
so when you need to do something, they have the skill to be able to do it. So
Yeah.
they've done it before, and they know the routine, they know the drill, they can just come out and do it. And so generally speaking, we have a limited number of those that are in the consciousness all the time. And we also have a larger group, and you can, what's the word? It kind of will vary for different people, but generally people will have maybe access to 4 or 5, what we might call surface states, that they're there kind of generally speaking as they go through the day. We can often be fairly continuous, we might be in the same state or part all day, but when different contexts might trigger it. I think the parts can also have a state with them, but the parts in the way that I'm referring to them are more solid because they're more wired.
Okay.
Whereas I think in the states that you're talking about, it's like on the one hand, in order to embody a particular state, you would have to have some experience of it or some reference point.
Yeah.
And so for each of us as individuals, we'll all have our own repertoire. Do this and I can do that, and I can't do that, like because I just don't have the I think in NLP they talk about logical levels. So you just don't have the competence or the behavior, but you can help somebody to kind of access a particular state. And so they can, as they take on the state, the likelihood is that they'll also need to take on behaviors, because we tend not to have the states as just like kind of nebulous, abstract, floating around.
Yeah,
it'll
definitely.
tend to be, so like when you think of a particular state, I don't know, when you're maybe doing some particular athletic performance, you're gonna refer back to something that you've done, so in a particular time when you learned a skill or you were involved in a team and you remember that which I would refer to as a part that learned those kind of skills, and then you might abstract from that the state that part experienced, and then take that forward into a new context. And that might then be the part of you that becomes the excellent presenter or whatever it is that you're seeking to do.
Yeah. Clear. And how many parts?
I think maybe one of the things that when I'm thinking of part in this way, it's more of a performance, or it has the performance element. So there are specific skills, tangible things that you do. So it's not just a kind of a muse.
So it's related to kind of on a behavioral level as well, and multiple, as we call it, multiple logical levels, some kind of tingled together, or like a cluster of solid, more or less solid cluster of things.
Yeah. So in the formation, when the parts are forming, they form in a particular context in relation to particular things. So they have this skill, and they kind of they perceive a context in a particular way. And what we're then looking to do later is to see and to utilize a way of allowing this part to operate in contexts other than the ones that it feels that were its original breeding ground. Or its original kind of context.
So it could be some kind of almost resource to some other behaviors, but we never applied that particular, and we never really used that part to drive any other behaviors or worked in other contexts.
Yeah, and one of the particular therapies, modalities that I've have an interest in and know quite a bit about, it's actually they refer to these parts as resources. So within us, we have these resources that we can utilize, and we can take elements of them perhaps and blend new parts, by kind of almost like taking the bits of old ones and kind of rejigging them and showing them different contexts.
Perfect. So as a theory, sounds really interesting. Tell me, please, if I would be, interested to apply it in some ways, or if I would like to utilize what you just explained. Are there any simple examples of the parts which like almost everyone has and can be used? So I'm just trying to turn our conversation in from theoretical part, which seems like more or less clear, to the practical one. I mean, is there anything I can do in order to utilize those parts?
Well, I think one of like I was saying a few moments ago, one of the basic things is to be asking this kind of question all the time. Which part is now, and is this the best part? So that you kind of have that almost like a classical philosophical inquiry. So
Mm-hmm.
rather than taking it for granted and just having a constant, well, I'm this kind of person, I do that, having a more inquiring take on it and so you can ask yourself, well, which part is that? And one of the skills that this resource therapy has is uh, a procedure or an approach where they say they talk about vivify specific. So when you address the part specifically and directly, it'll give you a clearer demarcation and understanding of exactly what its role and functions are.
Perfect.
So what I'm kind of saying, it's in the background of my head, is that you'll have a certain understanding of a part that it can do certain things, but the part, like anything, will also have like shadow elements. So it might be good at doing certain things, but it might be very cagey about other things, and it could be frightened of certain things, and so it could avoid getting into certain contexts altogether because it had a bad experience in the past.
I have
And
a question.
go on.
I have a question. Sorry for interruption. I have a question. Like, for example, I'm just trying to catch. I understand that you are referring to some body of knowledge. You mentioned resource therapy. Is it the name of that body of knowledge which you are right now interested in and kind of digging into and professional, right?
Yes.
Resource therapy. So I'm just curious because I was about to ask you, how can I label the part and how I can recognize the part? Example, right now
Mm-hmm.
we are talking. Right now we are talking. And if right now I would be asking myself, what part of me right now is kind of activated, and is this the best part? I mean, those are two questions, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I supposed to ask myself, what kind of part right now is activated? How can I'm not sure. I mean, how can I label it and how can I recognize it? So if you, Jim, if you right now asking that question to yourself, what kind of answer do you have?
Right. Well, I think what I would be considering is, generally speaking, often, I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe just universally, when the right part is out, there'll be no problem. So
Ah,
it becomes a critical issue when there's some kind of interruption. There's
okay,
something kind of, it's just not running smoothly. So
okay,
so
okay.
at that point, you kind of you can do the bit of checking and think, well,
You're questioning. Okay.
what's going on here? So you're going to do something and you kind of get really stuck,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're thinking, well, which part of me is stuck? What, and sort of ask some questions about that.
Okay, so makes sense to ask that question when something is not going smoothly, and so as a result, you are questioning what that obstacle or what that unnecessary or not wanted, I don't know, maybe not the right word, but why and what exactly is going on right now, and is there any better part to use in this particular context, right?
Yes,
Okay.
and probably for most people, um, what will happen is when they have a problem, the way that I'm describing it, which is kind of very easy, most
Mm-hmm.
of us don't have that skill. So
Mm-hmm.
what would happen for most people is they're in a context and a situation and they feel uncomfortable. They're not able to perform the way they would want to do, or they just feel that it's not right. And the
Mm-hmm.
likelihood is, if that keeps occurring or it occurs in an extreme enough situation, that they may well then go and seek help from a therapist,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they'll realize that something's kind of going on, and that it has more gravity It's a deeper rooted problem than they appreciate.
Well, therapist for me sounds kind of quite dramatic. I mean, what I mean, what I mean is that imagine I have like a anxiety, or maybe when I go about to talk with the public, kind of public speaking, for example. I mean, I could feel that I am not in the right state, and I don't know, maybe I get I start to sweat, kind of sweating, and yeah, obviously not the most resourceful state, and I am asking myself, I mean, what is going on? Which part of would go supposed to kind of go away? Why that part is activated right now? And can I bring some other part? And if I'm not able to do, I mean, my first thought would not be go to the therapist. It's like, wow, come on. I mean,
Yeah,
I
and I think,
for the public speaking, probably kind of professional, or I don't know.
and I think this is a huge. Let me get this right. A huge kind of almost like a philosophical divide, or not, and there's a kind of there's two apparently different approaches, but there's a I'm trying to think of a way to express this. There's a different in the root of the problem. So
Yeah.
what I would say, and this is, I think this fits in perfectly with the NLP and the logical levels kind of stuff. So if you have a problem, let's just stick with the public speaking, because most people have some kind of understanding of that.
Exactly.
So the judgment that you're looking to make is the difficulty with the public speaking pathological and really having a terrible impact on your life, or is it just something you're a bit nervous of talking in front of crowds?
Okay.
So like on the one hand, it could be, I think, like I was saying with the NLP, it could be like just a behavioral thing. So you might speak to a coach or a therapist or anybody or a friend, and they say, well, have you tried doing this? So do the breathing, a load of other things. Get yourself well positioned, get yourself supported, make sure that you're prepared, pick one person in the, do all of those things, slow down, keep breathing, because, those are the kind of, so you can go through those steps with somebody, and it may well be that that's sufficient. That solves the problem.
Yeah.
And this can happen at any level, but for some people, what seems to be going on is that the part that would be able to do the speaking has had an experience when it was very young. And this experience I would refer to almost as being like kind of wired in, it's kind of like burnt in and solidly formed.
Okay, almost like a trauma, kind of.
Exactly. A trauma would be the word. Now, and it's important when we use the word trauma to bear in mind that, that has a whole range of kind of what you might refer to as experiences in the objective world, but also what the person experiences themselves. So if you experience something as a child and you don't have the opportunity to speak to an adult about it, you hold it in on yourself and you're frightened, and you don't have the language to talk about it, and that kind of stays locked in forever until you do something about it.
Yeah.
So, and in the resource therapy, we talk about these parts as being invaded. So they've had this fearful experience, or they felt rejected, and they haven't been able to integrate the experience. So they haven't been able to talk to a friend about it, and say, because they were too young, they didn't have the language, they didn't understand. And oftentimes children have experiences where, because they're frightened, and one of the fears, and these are like can be real existential problems. They're frightened because their carers are the people that keep them alive. So they don't want to kind of jeopardize that relationship. They don't want to upset it. And so they have all of that going on. So they just lock it in. We all do this. And this is why I believe these kind of original traumas is why we often have this discrepancy, this gap between what we intellectually know, and this is a crucial point, what we intellectually know and feel that we can do and what we're actually doing.
Yeah.
And I think this really is a kind of huge, because what's happening often is the intellectual part of us, the adult, knows what we should do, but this kind of original trauma maybe only gets triggered in certain contexts. So when it's in front of a crowd or when it feels that it's left alone, and that part that fear somehow gets triggered by something in the context.
Yeah.
And that part goes back to its original response, which is maybe just to run away.
Yeah. So that's where probably classical coaching in some situations are kind of not working very well, because it stumbled upon something much more deeper and rooted and almost like operate on its own.
There's one of the guys that I've been reading some stuff over the last few years has some incredible ideas on this. A guy called Bruce Ecker.
Oh yeah, I think I heard.
And one of the things that he talks about is that when these memories are kind of burnt in and kind of formulated and they're kind of like fused, unless they've done all this research with kind of mice and that this is the way, they call it memory consolidation and memory reconsolidation. So when something is kind of burns in, so when we have these particular childhood experiences, the intellectual part that you have can agree and can come up with coping strategies and can bring you successfully through life, and you can do well. But at some point, perhaps most people encounter a difficulty that they can't overcome. So you read all the stories, so people who can be terribly successful, but their personal relationships are a mess, or they make a load of money, but they become a drug addict, or, so they just have some problem, something that's stopping them having it all. And Ecker says that the part that's fused, you need either in therapy, or sometimes it could happen in coaching, but that part needs to be activated and brought to life.
Yeah.
And then the chemical structure, literally the chemicals around it, free the memory up. And at that point, you can put a new scenario or schema on top of it. And he talks about, I think, a period of about 5 or 6 hours, when the new experience can be reconsolidated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a finally processed, finally kind of bring some different meaning to it. Or in some ways it's integrated. It's not isolated anymore. Okay.
Yeah. And what he says, otherwise, what we're often doing is talking to the parts that are intellectual parts or grown-up adult parts that can strategize, which is why, I mean, yourself, you look on Amazon, there's thousands of self-help books, there's thousands of what do you call those things, strategies for dealing with procrastination and getting things done, and clearly they don't work.
Well, they do up to a certain degree. I mean, I wouldn't say like totally don't, but
yeah, and this is the thing. Some of them will work for some people some of the time, of course, and the key is the context that it worked. So it could just be that it's not that the strategy is particularly good, but maybe a load of things have happened in the person's life and they're just more susceptible to change.
Yeah.
Like they really need to change because everything's crumbling around them. And they're what's the word? And they are in that state where they're more receptive. Like I think a classical reason for why exams can sometimes be good, because the pressure and the build up to sit in an exam means that you're feeling under almost like an existential threat, and you're working really hard, so everything is kind of looser. And obviously some people will struggle with exam, and other people might find out that they learn more.
So in terms of practicalities, again, I am kind of trying to move towards something which we can do about it. So asking yourself and be aware if something is not a little bit like not working, or you see that you are sabotaging yourself in any kind of form and shape, you could ask yourself, okay, which part it is now activated, and is there any other part I do have or I remember which, if I would bring it here, probably would do the job, right?
So, and I think you can see a real similarity between this kind of inquiry and almost what you see some Buddhists and some other kind of schools of thought, that thing, to who does that thought occur to,
Who is thinking right now?
And so you go, so which part is thinking this? So like for me, one of the things, and this is a thing for a lot of people, is like, say you have to do the washing up, the dishes after a meal. And the question then is, when you're doing that, are you in a resentful frame of mind? So it might be that your mind's empty and you think about other things. Why am I the one having to do this? Why don't they do it? And you're kind of setting up that whole corrosive biochemistry. And clearly, that's not helpful. And if it kind of keeps repeating, so the question then could be, well, which is the best part to be out for the dishes? And the answer is a part that likes playing in water. So it's kind of like a reframe.
Reframe, but yeah, it's true. Reframe, but at the same time, a little bit different, because you are actually bringing resource immediately. I mean, there are some parts of you when you're a child kind of playing in the water and you had some fun. And if you're able to somehow to get that feeling back, it's almost like you said reframing, but reframing, in my mind at least, kind of a little bit more, I would say, intellectual and logical. But here we could access something maybe not logical at all. It's just a kind of state or part of you enjoy water. I mean, interesting.
Or enjoys the process of tidying up and making little piles and or you could do something like put music on and dance while you're doing it. Or,
but
I think it's this kind of, what you're seeking to do is to create this fluidity where you're not stuck in a rigid state, and then when something happens, that state feels threatened or is losing control. So you can, so you have that thing. So, well, what's this part that's out now? Is it a part that's kind of is it kind of moody? Is it resentful?
So as you said, it's actually useful and very practical to notice as soon as you have any kind of hint of negativity or something is not going right, not going smooth, or in any form and shape, you are kind of not having fun and shifting towards some negativity and resentment, right? That
Yeah, or conflict, or you're just not able, you're just not the way you would like. You what's the
yeah,
word? Incongruence. That's the word they use. You're not the way you would like to be in the situation.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah,
and it could be, obviously the other side of it is the part could be telling you, actually, this isn't a good situation to be in.
yeah,
You know, like, so you need to scan the environment with the perspective of that part. You know, maybe it's it's the wrong situation. You know,
could be,
maybe
yeah,
maybe there are real threats there.
yeah,
You know,
exactly.
or that it's not an environment that supports you to perform the way you would want.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, it could go both ways, not just every time you're looking for the part which will embrace the circumstances. Maybe it's time to, to change circumstances. I mean,
Yeah.
okay, makes sense. Okay, that's really, really interesting. So thank you very much. I'm just curious about, yeah, we are more or less already in the end of conversation. So what would be your recommendation for people? Oh, no, I can hear already one recommendation. Guys, search, and if anything kind of cannot be resolved through your own efforts, yeah, the therapy and professionals who know how to deal with parts and who know how to resolve those unresolvable issues. But is there any other recommendation you would uh, express right now to our people who watch?
No, I think that was a brilliant kind of summation that you came up with there, and I think it is this kind of thing. I suppose one of the things that I would say is that a bit like some of the language in NLP, that the parts generally are looking to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so you're kind of seeking to form alliances with them, and how might they best be able to help. And sometimes that might be that they just stand aside and let a different part do it.
Yeah.
But it's that kind of, and it comes out to that notion to just be more compassionate. So when you get into some difficulty or you encounter a problem, rather than having lots of negative internal dialogue and self-criticism and all of that stuff, realize that there's a reason for that, and that stuff is with a particular part that's had particular experiences. And so you need to show compassion to that and be generous spirited,
Yeah.
get it on
So,
side, and
so the
then
part is really well intended, but maybe under these circumstances it creates.
yeah, because they never resolved the initial trauma.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that one of the reasons which you told me several times already, that you are writing a book about part. I mean, is there any advances there? And do you have a title? When we are going to see it?
I think I think this is a slower process. I think, but again, this is a kind of a perfect what's the word, illustration, without going into the whole thing again, about clearly you have a part that wants to write the book,
Yes.
and you have a part that has ideas, and you have parts that kind of hold you back and inhibit,
Yeah.
so you need to kind of engage with this matter in a compassionate manner, and kind of see, well, what needs to happen, rather than kind of going in for this kind of bullying kind of thing. Well, I need to do this and I need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And treating your, sorry,
Yeah, it's instead of forcing, kind of go into more like compassionate negotiation kind of type of
yeah.
approach.
And without kind of going into it, but there's a man called Gilbert who has developed a whole therapy around just being compassionate.
Yeah.
It's a big thing, this notion of being generous and not taking this kind of bullying mentality to ourselves.
Yeah. Awesome, Jim. Thank you very much. Enjoyed our conversation, and
You're welcome.
I hope to hear from you soon with our next topic. Thank you.
No
Have a nice
problem,
day.
guys. Thank you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.